Alright, so in this video we're going to be going over how to play the healer role in the Hive of the Gorgons. Now before we start, there's actually a few builds that you can theoretically run in this raid as a healer, and it will pretty much depend on your other healers. So I guess one way to think about it is that you want to have one healer dedicated towards just healing the tank, so that would be like a single target healer. They would be speccing into Divine Embrace, and maybe Splash of Light and Fortifying Sacred Ground. The other healer, you don't necessarily need Divine Embrace. You could probably run Beacon. In fact, that's probably the play. So basically there's two real ways to play healer in the Hive of the Gorgons raid, and either your AoE heals or your single target heals with some AoEs. So yeah, that's the basis of this. In this video I'll be going over primarily the single target healer setup, but you can use this in tangent with AoEs as well, which I'll talk about later. So the build that I use while running this, and that's probably the gameplay you'll be seeing here, is Divine Embrace, Splash of Light, and Sacred Ground. Now there's a lot of reasons to run Splash of Light. Normally I don't run Splash of Light, but in this raid specifically it's very, very useful because you can heal everybody, and there's a pretty high chance that a lot of your teammates are going to be spread out in a lot of these boss fights. So it makes a lot of sense to run Splash of Light, and I would highly recommend you run that unless you're in a very, very dedicated group who have ran this before, but in that case you're probably not watching this video. So starting off the raid, I'm not going to cover too much. It's really not too difficult to get to the first boss. Even the first boss isn't too difficult, but I will explain the mechanics for all that are interested. So before we get to the first boss though, generally, you know, if you've played healer before, you can probably understand how the flowchart typically works. Wait for the tank to get situated, put a sacred ground down, etc. But in this case it might be slightly different, because if you have two healers, you want to decide which healer will be dedicated towards healing the tank and which healer will be dedicated towards maybe healing all the other DPS. Now this makes a lot more sense to talk about if you're in like a pug group who aren't as coordinated, and you might have to kind of spread out your heals. So just kind of talk with your other healer and figure that out beforehand. Alright, so starting off for the first boss, if you watched my previous guide on how to play the Evade Rapier, I suggested running the Strike Protection Amulet. Now you don't necessarily need to run a Strike Protection Amulet for the first boss as a healer, and the reason is I don't tend to go on top of the pillars, so I like to stay on the ground, and it helps me you know, be able to heal everyone close range a lot more easier for me to do that. You can theoretically just keep going on the pillars, and that is definitely an option as well. So there's really no reason not to run a Strike Protection Amulet if you have it. Generally the mechanics for this, if you are new to it, pillars, they will strike up from the ground. When he's stamina broken, you want to get in there, put an Oblivion down. That's very, very important. Whenever he's stamina broken, get in there and put an Oblivion down. It'll increase the damage of all the other DPS. And crystals, of course, same idea. Whenever they spawn, put an Oblivion down, help the DPS do more damage. A lot of it is going to come down to using Void Blade, and you'll kind of realize that as we get further into the bosses here, how important using Oblivion and Void Blade are, especially on the second boss. I'll get into that more later, but for now, it's just going to come down to rotating your heals, using Oblivion when you need to increase DPS for, let's say, crystals. If you have some DPS who are playing close range melee and they're good enough to survive that type of fight, then you could put a Oblivion there and just rotate that out as well. Generally though, this fight is pretty much the same. If you watched my previous video, I covered it. Second phase, he's going to jump. Watch out for the jumps. He's going to jump 4 times, and you want to be able to dodge those. You can tank probably 1 or 2 hits, but you definitely want to be dodging those. So conserve your stamina when he does reach the second phase, and you will be golden. It's not too hard of a fight, so I won't put much effort into explaining this one. Alright, and then again, once you complete the boss, you're just going to be going through the dungeon as usual. I won't explain too much here until we reach the second boss, there are a few things that I will mention that might be slightly important, but generally if you're running in a group who have at least some experience, this should already be known. You can skip a few enemies, so you don't have to kill everything. You can if you want to, though. And then once you reach the maze part, you know, you could either go as an entire group or split up, depending on how you guys want to play it. It's not too important though, because even if you die, you can just respawn. There's no real risk or ramifications when you die, unless you're in a boss fight. So that's why I think I'm going to focus more of my explanations on the bosses. Without further ado, let's get right into the second boss. Okay, so for the second boss, you're probably going to want to run a nature protection amulet. This will allow you to take a few more damage points when it comes to the thorns, which is probably going to be your main damage source when you're trying to survive as a healer. It's pretty easy to survive as, let's say, a rapier player, because you'll have a bunch of haste, so it's easy to run away when you have the red circle. However, when you're playing as a healer, you won't have that much haste, so it's going to be pretty important that you conserve your stamina for those red circles. And that's kind of the first mechanic that I'm going to touch on here, is you'll see red circles spawn around random players and you'll have to run away. So far they haven't showed up. The second mechanic is the adds that spawn. When this happens, you're going to want to put your sacred ground towards the bird that spawns. Now this will depend on what sort of role you're playing as a healer, because as I said before, you know, you'll have a healer dedicated towards healing the tank and a healer dedicated towards maybe healing the DPS. And especially when the adds spawn, you'll want to have a sacred ground close to those adds. And you'll also want to make sure that you're using Void Blade often. Like very, very often you should be using this, because not only will it allow you to heal your teammates because you'll have that aura that'll spawn around you, it'll also apply a rend and it'll allow you to lower the cooldown for Oblivion, and that will allow you to put it down as soon as possible whenever it's available. There shouldn't be any real cooldown on Oblivion, and this will increase the DPS value of your whole group. So there's a lot of reasons to be using Void Blade. Now you'll see we're going into the next phase, the next section here, because we phased the boss. And yeah, you'll see I just put in a Sacred Ground on the tank and then put down an Oblivion. That's sort of like the starting rotation that you want to do, and then just start using Void Blade. You want to be using this, like I said, pretty often until the adds spawn. So there's those thorns, you see those red circles. Everyone else is running away, and if you were to have thorns, for example, you would run away as well. This will lower the potential healing output. You'll see he just did that spin attack. So when he does that spin attack, I'm ready to use a Splash of Light, and this will heal everyone who got hit by that. Ideally, you know, the DPS can dodge that, but if they don't, it's good to kind of proc that early so that you can heal them. You can see we clumped them up here, so I put a Sacred Ground and also an Oblivion, and then just went right into Void Blading. I'm also kind of playing both roles here. As you can see, I'm doing Divine Embrace on the tank as well. In this case, the other healer is actually dedicated towards healing the tank, but I'm kind of like slipping in some Divine Embraces when necessary if the tank does need to be healed. Now we have the pillar phase, so not much to talk about here. The general mechanic you should already realize. If you have that black/red skull above you, you want to get behind a pillar. Same situation though, we're just going to burn the boss, put down Oblivions, really make sure that you're utilizing Void Blade. Okay, so now we have thorns, so we're going to run away. Unluckily for that guy, he kind of got stuck in that thorn, so he's going to go down. Right after thorns, I'm just going to use Splash of Light to heal anyone who might have taken damage there. And then we're going to use a Divine Embrace on the guy we just revived. It's a good habit to do that. And then immediately we're just going to go right to this bird and put a Sacred Ground and an Oblivion, and then use our Heart Rune. I haven't really covered the Heart Rune yet. I guess it's a good time to do that. We're running Stone Form, and there's a few reasons to do that. First reason, of course, we're going to have Fortify, but even perhaps the bigger reason is it'll allow us to avoid being CC'd. And in this specific boss fight, those wolves will stun you for a really long time. So being able to use Stone Form and avoid that CC that'll last for, I don't know, like 5 seconds, it's very, very useful. I don't know if I have any gameplay of that, but yeah, that's why I would recommend Stone Form. Same idea though, just going to be using our abilities here, using Void Blade whenever possible, and swapping to the Life Staff when we need to heal everybody. Now we phase the boss, so we're going into the third section here. And like I said in my previous video, I'll cover it here as well. There are a couple ways to do this third section. You can either kill the ads like normally, or you can try to just burn. I think in this run we were just trying to burn, so there wasn't a huge focus on the ads. And the reason is because you can pretty much survive the bleeds, especially if you have strong healers. And in this run we actually had very, very strong healers, where we were timing our splashes of light. And this is actually something to mention. When he does end the ad phase and he consumes the wolves, they'll apply a lifesteal / bleed onto all the players in the arena, depending on how many wolves he consumed. And it's a really, really important thing to use your splash of light kind of as that's happening. I'll talk about that when it's about to happen, because I think it is about to happen. So after this ad phase, yep, so right now he's consuming all of them. I'm trying to get my splash of light ready, and there it is, so I'm going to pop it. And that will give everyone full health from that. It's very important to do that, because later on, you know, he's going to have a ton of lifesteal, and that can drain all of your health. So yeah, it's very important. And then we're just going to finish off this fight. So yeah, that's pretty much the second boss right there. It'll take some time to maybe learn all the mechanics, of course, because that's really what it is. And if you're a newer healer, then you will have to kind of just get a feel for things, I guess. Anyways, I guess we'll get into the third boss now, and we'll talk about that. Alright, so for the third boss, what we're going to be trying to do here, it will depend, of course, on kind of which role you're playing, whether or not you're going to be dedicated towards healing the tank or dedicated towards maybe healing the DPS. In this group, I was somewhat dedicated towards healing the DPS, and the other healer was going to heal the tank. However, it's not a bad idea if the tank does need to get some health, that you also help the tank as well. You'll see I'm putting a Sacred Ground on the eggs, and also running over to put an Oblivion down there as well. This should generally be your strategy. So whenever the eggs spawn, try to get over there and put an Oblivion down, just to help your DPS burn those a little bit quicker. Generally what you want to do here is just be careful of the mechanics. If she is going to charge, obviously you want to get away from that. Go help the DPS for the eggs. You'll see here we have another thing of eggs. And also just pay attention to the health of all of your players. Make sure they're full health. Heal them when necessary. It's all the same stuff, you know, as you would normally expect from a healer, except you kind of have to bunch it up with all of these mechanics. So I'm just kind of like glancing through the arena, looking at everyone's health, trying to make sure everyone's full health, and if someone is you know, less than 50% or so, I'm going to use a Divine Embrace on them. And then also, if the tank needs to be healed, of course, that should be your top priority. And also, don't be afraid to help the DPS with their job too. So if you see the flowers need to be killed, go ahead and do that as well. And then if someone needs to be cleansed, use a cleanse on them. And yeah, it's generally just going to be a rinse and repeat of the mechanics. So I guess I could kind of explain some of these mechanics, but a lot of it will just be practice and just understanding these mechanics on your own. That's really how you're going to get the best feel for it. But like I said, just look for those eggs, look what the DPS are doing, and try to help them when necessary if your role is to heal the DPS. If you're trying to heal the tank, then that should be your primary focus as well. You can see I'm kind of like flipping back and forth with healing the DPS and healing the tank here. Basically just whatever is necessary for the group, I'll put the heals there. And yeah, I mean, it's a lot of the same stuff here. You want to just try to help the DPS as much as possible, and that's going to come down to a lot of oblivions. You can see right now we have the poison stacks, but a lot of those sorry, those cleanses are actually used up, so we can't actually get a cleanse off. So I'm just trying to dedicate my heals towards healing everyone that needs to be cleansed here, so that they can survive a little bit. Alright, so right now you can kind of see that there's someone slept on the right, and someone just cleansed them. That's the other thing to look out for, is if someone is ever in that white cloud for a long period of time, that's gonna excuse me, it's gonna apply a sleep on them, and they won't be able to interact unless they're cleansed. So just pay attention to the whole group and look out for if someone needs to be cleansed, because it's very important, if they are slept, that you get them as soon as possible, especially the tank. The tank should probably be close to a cleanse totem anyways, just so that they can fend for themselves for the most part. So you realistically shouldn't need to cleanse the tank too much, although if the tank is specifying that they might need to be cleansed, of course that should be your top priority. And yeah, like I said, it's just going to be the same old stuff. I'm weaving in some heals on the tank, and you can see that guy needs to be cleansed because he slept, so that's what I'm going towards right there. And yeah, just look at all the mechanics. If the flowers need to be killed, you can do those. Another thing is, don't be afraid to just use an Oblivion randomly, just to help some ranged players get some extra DPS value. I didn't do it too much for this fight specifically, but it's one thing that I do think is a really good idea. Just put down an Oblivion if your Oblivion is off cooldown. Don't necessarily wait for eggs, because you can increase the value of all of your ranged players, especially when attacking the flowers, for example. You want to put that Oblivion down. And yeah, just run through all the mechanics here. Watch out for the charge. That's probably the biggest thing, because if there's anything that's going to kill you, it's going to be that charge. So yeah, generally that's just the whole entire fight. I don't want to just ramble on too much here, so I think that about covers it for the third boss. Alright, so now let's go over the gear and sort of like some extra bits of information here in terms of setting up for the build. Realistically, there's not much of a difference between healing the DPS versus healing the tank. I have two separate perk trees. You can see if you by the way, a link for this spreadsheet's in the description, so check it out if you want to look at it yourself. But yeah, generally it's going to be about the same. The gear is going to be pretty much the same as well. The one thing that you definitely want to make sure you have is a really good ring with Hardy, Sacred, and Healing Breeze, and you also want a really good life staff with Refreshing Move, Blessed, and Fortifying Sacred Ground. Those are the two most important things. And then in terms of our Void Gauntlet, we're going to run a Life Taker here and put on Ferocious Blade for our last perk on there. And then there's two options for your artifact on your armor. Either you could run the Gray Wizard's Hat for some extra intelligence, or and also for extra mana. You could also run Nimble Coat for more refreshing, and those are both really good options. So just use, whatever you prefer in that situation, I guess. They both have a lot of merits, so I guess if you have one of them, you don't have the other one, just use the one you have. So that's why I'm giving two options there. And then for the armor, you could realistically, so like all of this stuff is with Hoplite armor, all of this is named. You probably won't have all this, so in that case, just prioritize the weapon perks. So for example, you definitely want to have either Refreshing Divine Embrace or Keen Beacon, and you'll also want
Purity of Light. And then all the other perks, you probably want to focus on health, enchanted ward, and that's pretty much it. So I wouldn't put too much effort into getting, best in slot stuff, because you really don't need to focus too much on that until you get the hoplite armor, and then you can just upgrade it from there. But yeah, just make sure you have these weapon perks, because those are pretty important to have as a healer. And other than that, that about covers it. There's not a lot of information here, but if you do want to check it out, like I said, I'll have a link to this spreadsheet in the description below. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one.